Lama, you've woken up well. Na tayari ushakimbia kwenye hustle. Kama unakimbia ofisini, tayari you're already in the office, and also you're going to the hustle, tayari kwamba ushaamka. Wanasema kazi ni kazi, wera ni wera. Wengine wanasema mboka ni mboka. Haya, kwa Kiingereza tutasema job is job. Alright. It's another Tuesday morning. It's good to see you guys, and I request that when you join in, please like. When you like, I get to know that you're watching us, and after like, please share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. We're going to have a back-to-back common sense edition. That is, we are on Mondays, as usual, we talk about life and business, and also we're going to have an extension today where we get to talk about the issues that matters. We talk about economy, we talk about, we talk about administration, we talk about policy making, and we're going to have a conversation with a very great guy, the guy called David WACHIRA, all the way from, now we'll say all the way from America, because we have got international, but he comes from here. Nyumbani ni hapa Nyahururu, but he's been working once at World Bank as a policy expert, and also he's been doing a lot of projects down here, and he'll tell us about it, the CSR activities that he's been up to. So he's also a fintech entrepreneur, so he's tell us mambo ambayo anafanya hapa yanakuwa vipi. We can have a conversation with him. That's one of the interesting thing that we've noted about him. I saw the vibe on social media, on Instagram, that even in America, he has remained a Mukorina. So it's another morning request on the journey. Please like. When you like, I get to know that you're watching us. And after you like, please share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. This is a tackle and it begins now. Lakini kama kawaida, kabla tujaanza lazima tuende mbele za Mungu tuombe. And when we come back, we're going to start off the show straight away. Mighty Father, we come before you this morning. We worship you, glorify your name. Thank you for another opportunity to be alive. We thank you for this second day of the week. We thank you for the month. We thank you for this conversation that we are about to have. We even thank you for this show. As we start off, we pray that you're going to be with us. Even every tackler that's going to join in, may you meet them at the point of individual needs. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray and believe. Amen and amen. Haya, wacha nione watu wameamka tayari. Emmanuel Serem anasema good morning, good people. Good morning to you, my brother. Munga alita continue. Morning team tackle tuning in from Convent United Kingdom. Good to be part of this morning show. Good to see you, my brother. Jane Mumbi, good morning, good people. Good morning to you, Jane Mumbi. Finally, your guest is here. Emmanuel Serem, naona ameamsha Honorable Moses Kebenenyi Ganet, Cheptap Kibiri Reds, Leonard and Isaac Serem all the way from diaspora, Australia. Good to see you guys this morning. Governor Nick Cheriat, good morning, Kiongozi from Ethiopia. Good to see you guys from Ethiopia as well. Geoffrey Masha, is it Masha? Okay, good morning, Masha Nikondani from Kasarani. MC Ken, good morning, Jirabito. Good morning to my brother, Isaac Ogeka, Kisii Town to Kondani. Asante Cheru Charles, good morning, watching from Ruiru. Kifa ito there from Thika, leo naona iko Sholo. Nasaba, good morning, watching from Isiolo. Asante sana, good to see you. Purity Tando, good morning, following. Good to see you, Purity, all the way from Dubai. Marion Evachela, good morning, GB, tuned in from the city, from City Cabanas. Good to see you, Marion. It's indeed a very, very good morning. Florence Agola, Kisumu Ndani. Thank you, the guys from Kisumu. Florence Agora, it's a pleasure to have you. Moha Ibrahim, good morning. Caleb Gorir, mad respect for Daktari. Asante sana, thank you so much, Caleb. Balozi Eric Major, and what is going on in our police service must be seen for what it is, a national crisis of monumental proportions. If they're not busy killing and maiming innocent citizens, they're busy killing one another. Where is the IG? It's weird that after the tragic murder of the two young brothers from Embu by 6 police officers, they had to take the intervention of the DPP for the IG to move. Amidst all this, are Kenyans really feeling IG Mutamba's presence? Swali nyeti hapo kwa mambo ya polisi. Edson Artworks Frames, good morning. Well tuned in from Kajiado County. Good to see you, Man Nathan. A salute, Daktari is a role model watching. Thank you so much, Man Nathan. Mohai Ibrahim Mohammed from Malaba Bora. Good to see you. Faulet Kenani, good morning. Tuned in from Nairobi. Ruth Chepkosgei, good morning. Tuned in from Pride in Mombasa. Good to see you, the guys from Mombasa as well. Apram Chelanga, good to see you, my brother. Good morning. Gerald, I'm watching today from Kasarani, Nairobi. Karibu sana, Nairobi. Karoki Wamasi, watching the show from Kayole. Maro Mugesh, locked out the Kirurai 45. Asante sana to Wakidhu. It's a pleasure to have you again this morning, and I'm looking forward to have a great conversation with you. If you have any questions for Daktari, you can forward them on the comment section. Then I'll be able to read it out, and we're gonna have this conversation together. When you join in, please like. When you like, we know that you're watching us, and after you like, please share. When you share, you give someone else an opportunity to watch the broadcast. We start off now. Daktari, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I hope I'm going to match up my English with Biden's.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure all mine.
Finally.
Thank you for having us.
Uko salama?
Niko salama, sina shida yoyote.
Yeah, salimia wa Kenya.
Na wasalimia wote. It's good to tune in, and thank you for everyone who has joined in. As Gerald mentioned, my name is David WACHIRA. from here, though grew up in the US. Actually spent my formative years here, and then grew up in the US. So I left when I was a teenager, or right before I turned my teenage years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
At what age did you leave for America?
So I was 12, a month shy of my 13th birthday.
Oh, interesting.
I was in Standard 7 for Elbagan, Michinda Boys Boarding, and then went to Standard 8 in the US. Yeah.
Okay. So how has your background been like? Were you born nyumbani ni wapi? And then how did you end up going to America? We go to America when we were 50. How did you end up going to America when you were a teenager?
Yeah, so nilizaliwa Sagana,
Okay.
right there by the river. My mom was posted there by the National Cereals and Produce Board. So I was born there, and then they settled in Nyahururu. So I was born a year after they had been married, and then after that they moved to Nyahururu. And so that's where I lived, where we lived, my family lived. And my sisters were actually born there. And from Nyahururu we went to Limuru. I was told Limuru earlier is not Nairobi, so I should just call it Limuru.
Yes.
So we went to Limuru. My dad was in school there at St. Paul's when it was formerly a college before it became a university. And from there we went to Nairobi proper, actually. Umoja. I don't know whether we would consider that Nairobi as well. And then
That's Nairobi now.
from Umoja to Kayole, and then from Kayole to the US. And the reason why we went was my dad went to school for graduate school. So that's what took us there.
Oh, that's how you ended up in the
Yeah,
US.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he went a year before us, and then came back, picked us up, and from '97, that's where we were. A place called Austin, Texas. Yeah.
That's in Texas. Okay.
Yeah, the capital of Texas. So we were there from Austin. We spent 2 years in Austin. Then we went to Atlanta, Georgia. He was at Emory University. And then from Emory University, we went back to Texas, a place called Waco. And he went to Baylor University, which is famous in the U.S. for a few things, one being their track stars, so especially sprinters. So we were there. That's where he did his PhD. And that's where I did my undergrad. And then from there, we moved again to Dallas after I started school there. And my parents still live in Dallas to this day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you also live in Dallas, or you moved?
No. So 8 years ago, I moved from Dallas to Washington, D.C. So I was in, after I finished my PhD, I was applying for jobs. And of course, I applied to the World Bank. And so from there, from Dallas, I moved to D.C. And I've been based in D.C. for the past 8 years.
For the past 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's take you back to Nyahururu. What do you remember about Nyahururu? What is it you remember about it?
I remember multiple things. I went to, at the time I was going to a school called Elite Primary School. I think it has gotten much larger right there by Thompson Falls. My mom was also working for the National Cereals and Produce Board there. My aunt was there in Laikipia High, where I spent a good bit of time. And we stayed in a place called Site, Phase 2. So at least my Standard 1 and my pre-unit years were in Nyahururu, so I do recall those. And then the trips to Thompson Falls.
Those I remember about.
Yeah.
So how often do you get to come down here?
Oh man, quite often. This year, I've been here twice. So I was here in January and February and March, and then I went back to the U.S. I was supposed to be back here in April and May, but then the Kenyans refused to wear masks, and so we went on a lockdown, and so that trumped my plans. But then I came back in July. So and I've been here since July, and. Through the month of August. I would say maybe 3-4 times a year. I'm spending a considerable amount of time in Kenya.
In Kenya. So what brings you here? Sometimes most Kenyans, when they go to diaspora, they usually come in either for burials or for weddings. Even weddings these days, they don't come. They attend it virtually. So what brings you here most of the time back to the country?
So quite a lot of things. Actually, one of the main reasons why I came this particular time was a church harambe that we were doing.
Incredible.
In July, and so I tried to synchronize that with things that I'm working on. But usually, I mean, the first simple answer is because it's home. I love it. It's a great place to be. Two, I absolutely love giving back. I enjoy my time here. And I work with a lot of organizations and with a lot of individuals, and we do quite a variety of things. So, and then partly vacation, though this trip hasn't been had much of vacation. I actually did go to coast. This weekend is the only downtime I've had, but for the most part, it's usually work, personal and professional, business activities, and giving back to the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go to professional, probably we got to talk about the things that you do down here. You said you work with individuals and organizations, giving back, and these other issues. There has been a very interesting conversation around you and how you've managed to remain to be who you are, especially in your religious conviction of the Akorino movement. You've managed to maintain it and be proud and build a legacy around yourself on that matter. What's it been like, and what inspires you to really stay rooted in who you are as David Wachira?
No, it's a good question. There's a Swahili proverb, or "Mwacha mila ni mtumwa," right? Culture and background and society and upbringing are important. They're an important aspect of who you are as an individual. And usually when you give them up, you do it at your own peril. And a lot of people may give it up because they assume that what they have is diminutive or negative or stereotypical. I challenge that. I challenge that from a sense of pride and a sense that we have nothing to be ashamed about who we are. And in fact, that should be celebrated. It's that diversity that makes the country and as a community better. And for me, of course, being in the U.S., there have been challenges. The fact that one, I'm black, I'm African. Two, I wear a turban. Right? You get a lot of assumptions that come with that. They're very different from the assumptions that I get from people when I'm in Kenya. The assumptions in the U.S. is, okay, he's a foreigner, is an Arab, and
a black Arab.
Yeah, black Arab. Yeah, you have to start with the conversation that they're not very. They are, but they're not very many. So and then the fact that I wear a cross, also doesn't confuses some people, at least the intellectuals, because they're like, okay, I don't know very many Muslims who wear crosses, but for the most people, it's the assumption because of the terrorism activities, you're just lumped into that. And then, of course, the stereotypes about being black. In Kenya, it's different, right? Because for the most part, I look the same as everyone from this room, with the exception of my head covering. So there you are identified from a religious stereotype, and then the issues that go around with that religious stereotype about being a Mokorino, backward, uneducated, and one, okay, it's clearly not true, right, based on my background, and I'm not the only one, right? I'm not the outlier in the church or in the domination who is, the only one who's educated. So you use your life as a mantle to challenge stereotypes and break stereotypes, and hopefully bring down those barriers. So when people see me, there are some assumptions that they have, and then after that, you challenge those assumptions when you start off with the conversation, and, most people being rational people, they go back with a little bit learning moment, and now when they meet another person, not necessarily a Mokorino, but anybody else for that matter,
it's not the way they are.
Not the way they are. Hopefully, they'll be less likely to judge. And that's how we build societies, and that's how we develop. Right? I mean, we have biases. Most of them are learned. A good number of them are learned. As Mandela says, no one is born hating another person. Right? You learn to hate, and if you learn to hate, you can learn to love. So we just challenge those.
So, what is the most situation or a statement that has been made on that matter? They're saying that you get stereotype. Have you ever gone through something you would say has been a memorable reminder of stereotype and isolation, mental isolation?
Yeah, I mean, people will approach it differently. I choose to approach every one of those events as a learning moment for whoever that other person is, and challenging that particular stereotype. For me, I mean, the most common one are the ones that have happened at the the last trip I took to Treasury, where I was confused for being a waiter rather than the one facilitating the meeting. It happens when I take my car to get washed, and people assume that the car is not mine, and it's on loan, and I'm the driver, and or when my wife and I go out somewhere, and they ask me to drop her off, and
they don't even believe it's your wife.
Yeah, one, they don't believe it's my wife. They tell me to drop her off and then park the car. Right?
And it's your wife.
Yeah, it's my wife, right? So I mean, there are quite a number of those, or even the ones that people who actually mean well, and they say positive statements, largely from their exposure, and they would say something like, I'm very proud of you because wakorino hawasamangi, and you're like, that's not true. I understand the well-meaning part of it, but it's not true. So I think we have to go around life, and it doesn't matter whether you're Akorino or whatever faith you are, or whatever background you are, or whatever tribe you are. My philosophy is we have to go through life challenging this subconscious biases that people have and place upon people. And it begins by turning that particular mirror inward and asking myself, how is it that I interact with people in society? And have I placed myself in a situation where I am biased towards Gerald because he's not dressed the way I am, or he doesn't speak the way I speak, right? Even before I get to the visual aspect. And that's what I tell people, is that, you turn the mirror towards yourself, and then treat others very much the way you would want to be treated. And I think that's one of the ways that we can get well above and beyond tribal politics or racial politics or religious discrimination, gender discrimination. It's asking myself, when I compare myself to my sister, and I say, okay, Elizabeth is just as capable, if not more capable than I am. But the fact, by her gender, there's a stereotype that comes with it that she's supposed to be this, or she's supposed to be in the kitchen, or she's supposed to be doing this. And we have to challenge those things by looking at the mirror of ourselves and saying, you know what, that's not something I would want for myself. So why would I do it to another person?
Okay. All right. So let's also take us back now to your professional journey, where you've come from as a person from school. You mentioned you do school in Yoruru. I mean, you've ended all the way from the US. The things that you've achieved, the way professionally, where you've been, the things you've done. I would want to get a feel of that journey.
My accomplishments, I find them not to be very unique, and I say that from a very humble place, because I think my accomplishments have been there because of opportunities that have been given to me, and those opportunities, had they been given to someone else, I believe they would have ended at the same place that I am, and probably even gone higher. So I'm not unique in that sense. The only difference is that I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I happened to be born in the right family at the right time. I happened to have a father who went to study abroad, right? I think if I was someone else's kid who hadn't gone study abroad, I'd have been in multiple different ventures. Be that as it may, one of the things that my parents told me was the opportunities that you are given are to be celebrated by the community as a whole. So when you attain a specific aspect of success, you turn around and you share that success among your brothers and among your sisters. And for me, that means my community and particularly my country. And that's answering your question earlier on. It's why I come back so often, right? It's not because, they can be shared in the US, but, the place is already very developed. Let me go back home and distribute and make a difference. And so the journey, of course, has been quite difficult, particularly from a financial perspective. My family was not wealthy. It just so happened that my dad got an opportunity to go abroad via scholarship. That's what took us abroad. But financially, we were very hard-pressed, and it was a very difficult journey for all of us. And we all had to pull a significant amount of weight, probably more so than most people may in their college or high school years, in that, I started working for employment quite early, not because I wanted to, but because
You had to survive.
we had to survive, and we had to make ends meet, and we all had to pull our resources together, and that's one of the reasons why we made it as a family. Was there was a collective sharing of wealth and successes that propelled us a little bit farther. Because my dad was in school, my mom was in school at the time, I was in school, my sister Elizabeth. There was a time that all five of us had a backpack and were going to school, and no one was actually, working. So. But it has been a very interesting journey. In closing, I would say if I've seen further, it's just simply because I've stood on the shoulders of giants, and that has allowed me to extend my reach. There's a compounding of knowledge. It's not all attained by me. It's because knowledge was passed on from my grandfather and to my father and to society, and then I picked that up and I carried that baton a little bit farther. And so I even look within my family, the people who come after me, I expect a higher level of quote-unquote success, given that they don't have to go through the problems that my father went through or my grandfather went through, right? At least, good Lord willing, right? We wouldn't have to, figure out whether we will pay the rent or pay the school, right? At least, hopefully, for my family, those decisions will not be there. So if someone comes in and they're saying, I'm not going to go to school, the question is going to be like, kwa nini, why?
Why don't you want to go to school? Ni shule utaki ama ni nini?
Yeah. So it's not going to be from other families or other people who, say, what, I would want to go to school, but I can't go to school because of finances. That's one of the reasons why, as an organization and as me as a family, and we give back so much, is that in as much as I can help someone else cross that particular bridge or cross that particular chasm, I will do so.
All right. So let's talk about what you do. And you've rightly said that we work with World Bank. How did you end up there?
So during my master's, my master's thesis, I wrote a thesis on corruption.
Okay.
And the intersection between corruption and foreign aid. And I had a profound interest in development. I wanted to better my society. I wanted to better myself. I wanted to better my country. And so I looked at multilaterals, the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, or the fund as we call it. And I saw the work that they do. And I was quite interested from a Kenyan perspective, and even from myself as an individual wanting to go work for those organizations. The decision was twofold. One, I had a profound interest in development, and then two, I had been in the US for a good while. It was one good way for me to start, getting back home by working for these multilaterals. So after I finished my master's degree and started my PhD, I figured that this is what I wanted to do. And I knew it was very difficult. Not a lot of people do want to work for the World Bank, but they're not able to get in for a variety of reasons. So I finished my PhD, and one of my friends who we were in the PhD program together had come from the UN. And this was 2013. I had applied for a World Bank internship and didn't get it. And I'm, profound with statistics, and so I knew the odds were stacked not in my favor. But she said, they have, you should apply. It was just happened to be the call of the Young Professionals Program. This is for people usually under the age of 32. In fact, for those listening in, the Young Professionals Program for the IFC and for MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency of the World Bank, is going on right now up to September. So I'd encourage young people, if you have a master's degree and at least some experience or a PhD, definitely apply. There's also an analyst program which focuses on people who have finished their bachelor's and are don't have a graduate degree. So for sure, definitely apply. So, I applied. This was 2013. I applied in 2012, started in 2013. It was a very long selection process. Took quite a number of months and several phases. In my year, there were 8,300 applicants, so quite competitive. And I got in. Well, actually, at first I didn't get in. Because there's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So I first I was called in for the next phase of because you apply. Then there's a second phase where they go through, they're reviewing your documents. So we went from 8,300 to 1,200, and then I was like, this is there is hope. And then when we went from 1,200 to 200, and then I thought, Even if I don't get in at this particular part,
At
right?
least you've met some of
statistically, right? This is pretty good. So I thought to myself, I'm going to apply in other places where the odds are very much in my favor. Where instead of 8,300 to 1, they're like 40 to 1. It's like 40 to 1 all of a sudden didn't seem like big odds. So I applied everywhere: Harvard, Princeton, Ohio State. And then, interviews started coming in. So January 2013 to December 2012, January 2013 happened to be a very busy time for me because I did quite a number of interviews across the country. So I did the World Bank in December, and then I had Ohio State, Cleveland State, and UNC, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And so I did. Usually on most of these things, you do your first interview, which is over the phone, and then they fly you in for the face-to-face when you're now the shortlisted, and then, you get the job offer. So by March of 2013, I had 3 job offers, and then now I have this problem, is that where do I go, right? And
very good problems you
have. It was a good problem to have.
Very good problems.
Yeah.
When we all grow up.
Yeah. So, and I was still waiting on the bank. I knew from the bank I had gone from that 200 to 70 and now to 40, right? And I knew from that around 40, 36 were going to be selected. So the odds were getting just better and better. But of course I had to wait for the announcement, and I had this, interesting decision is that which job do I take? And, I remember one of my friends telling me, just take one, and then when the other one calls, just quit. And I said, that sounds really good in practice, but, I have to be very true to my word. And I'm going to interact with these people sometime or later. And they have spent a lot of effort flying me in and everything else. And I don't want to do a ruse and tell them I'm coming when I know for sure I'm not coming. It was not professionally sound, and, it's just not ethically right. And so I decided I'll tell the truth. So I wrote the people and I told them, listen, I appreciate the offer. It's a really good offer. But I have another offer on the table and another one coming in. Can you just give me 10 days to make a decision? And they said, yeah. I was surprised that they said, yeah. And then, a week later, the bank called me and told me, hey, we would like you to come to DC in September. I was probably excited, so I let everyone know that thank you so much. I had to write, the rejection letters, but you're writing to the employer.
You're rejecting the employer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. So I did that, and September 2013 started at the bank in DC, and that's how I moved to DC. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where you've been working now.
That's where I've been working for the past 8 years.
So what's your role there at World Bank?
So I'm what we call it is there's so many roles, but I'm a public finance specialist, or public finance and governance specialist to be more specific. So my background is in public finance. I work for a practice called the Governance Global Practice. So right now I'm really covering an area called energy and extractives, but the whole entire lens is on public finance. So for me personally, I do a lot of tax policy, tax administration, revenue management, and public management in general. Really focused on service delivery, and I do that from a high level of taking on the public finance. So I follow the money. Where's the money going? Whether I'm in the energy and extractive unit, looking at how can countries that have extractive industries use the resources generated from that to better their development.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure you've been here enough times. I don't know if you followed where the money goes here. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you've also paid attention. This is your country. I'm pretty sure that you paid attention to the state of the economy and the way the fiscal management is done. You give us a lot of money. World Bank gives us a lot of money. They also give us food parts. Sometimes some other guys, make very crazy food parts here. They look like kettle parts. But anyway, you give us a lot of billions of money. I don't know. What would you say is the state of the economy in this country?
Well, it's a complicated time, in general. As as a country, but globally, and largely due to the pandemic. I think 2020, 2021 is maybe not the perfect basis years to be looking at the state of the economy in general. But be that as it may, I think from a comparative analysis, I would say we are much better off than some countries in relative terms, largely because of how the country itself has been managed, or because of just plain luck, right? Or because of just where we're geographically placed, because of our influences to the west and to the east. So overall, I would say we're doing better on a comparative sense, right? Now, are we doing better compared to ourselves over time? Not discounting for COVID. I'm an optimist. I should start off with that, right? I would say yes, and maybe I think it takes someone or for someone to leave. When you're at home, you don't really appreciate the value systems or the good that is there. It's not until you go out and you compare other homes and you're like, hey, by the way,
kumbe kwetu ni kuzuri.
Yeah. So and for me, it was also the same way, right? I've traveled the world. I've been to 68 countries so far, a good number of them in Africa. And I remember the first time I went to Ghana, for example. You hear of Accra and you're thinking of this booming metropolis and you're so excited and everybody's telling you about Accra. And then you get there and it's so, what's the word? You're like deflating because, your hopes and expectations are very far from reality. Now, I'm not saying that Accra is not a great place. I'm saying I was expecting from where Nairobi is, right? Something, I don't even know what I was expecting, more like a London. And then I get there and I'm like, you know what? Actually, I think Nairobi is better comparatively, right? I'm not just talking about infrastructure, just infrastructure alone, even before we get to everything else. So that, at least for me, gives me a lot of hope, right, in comparison to others. When you go to Liberia, when you go to Sierra Leone, I mean, some of these countries are so far behind in development compared to us. Now, that doesn't mean that we should settle and that we don't have something progressive to do, because when we compare ourselves to like Singapore or to Chile or to other countries,
those are the people should be comparing ourselves
there's a lot
to.
that we should do,
And not Liberia. Liberia is a war zone.
Yes,
That's Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone, the other day we were sending troops there.
Yes.
So maybe we should be comparing ourselves with Singapore.
Yeah. maybe not Singapore. Maybe, I think maybe Zambia and Botswana and some of this will be probably a little bit better. But, overall, I think the economy is better. Can it be improved? Yes. I think strategically it can be improved. And I think for me, on a personal note, just for the viewers, I hit the microphone. So we had that noise. That's what it was. Too passionate about Kenyan development. For me, on a personal opinion, I think it needs to take an inward self-reflection, because there are things that we do comparatively and competitively better than a lot of other countries. And these are the issues and the areas that we are falling out and not doing as well. So, for example, if you take a look at horticulture, agriculture, we just by where we're placed geographically and in a much better environment. And when you look at what we are contributing to the global aspect, so for example, 1 out of every 3 flowers bought in Europe come from Kenya, right? But we're not able to set the price and economically, right? We sell this stuff at auction. So these are the things that we can take a look at ourselves better and say, what can we do, right? In terms from economic competitiveness based on what we have. Not what we do not have, but based on what we have, to make ourselves better. So I think there's a good bit of self-reflection that needs to be done, inward focus, and overall, I think we can better the economy, definitely.
All right. You said you also study corruption, or you look at corruption. I don't know if the eyes are still here when you come down here. You only study corruption out there. When you come in, do you think there's something we could do better in terms of public policy and public funds management?
Yeah. There's of course many things that we could do better in terms of public funds and public management. I go back to the aspect of inward reflection. So if you take a look at any decision making, whether public or private, that happens in this particular country, there's an expectation that something will be put to grease the wheel. Right? So for me, driving down the road last week, get stopped for speeding, and the first thing the police officer asks for is a bribe, and he's not doing it chini ya maji. I mean, he's doing it with impunity, looking you in the face and saying,
talking to it.
anakwambia cash bail ni 10k, like ukinipatia 5k enda tu, right? And I looked at him and I asked him, do you take M-Pesa? And he said, the system is down. I was like, well, then I can't help you.
Really?
Because I said, I didn't want to even debate whether or not I was speeding, because one, I knew I wasn't speeding, but I said, what I wanted to, like, if I'm caught in the wrong, I'm caught in the wrong. That's fine, right? Yeah. But I want the fine to go to where it's supposed to go, right? And so I want a receipt, right, for this cash bill, not you writing in this black notebook, right? I want a proper aspect. And the guy told me, we don't have a ticket book. And then I looked around and I said, then why have you stopped all these cars if you don't have a ticket book, right? What are you having conversations with them? Yeah. I mean, it's
a chama meeting.
It's a chama meeting. It's very different because when I got pulled over in Zimbabwe last time, I was in Zimbabwe and we were driving, and not saying that Zimbabwe doesn't have its fair share of corruption, but we got pulled over, and the police officer was saying, "Oh, you're not in the wrong. We're just doing an awareness campaign against speeding, right?" And and he goes, 30 seconds tells you how fast you are going, what the consequences of that are, and then he goes, slow down. I was like, thank you, officer. That's a memorable aspect. So now when I'm looking at 80, and you go 80 and not passing this one, this other one, a guy comes up on Thika Road, and he has my speed written on a piece of paper with a whole bunch of other numbers, and he says, you're going 108, right? He doesn't tell me that it's my car, and
is it your car? Yes.
Is it my car, right? And he goes, there was a white car, and you're looking the four of us, all white cars, right? You have to be something more specific. And for this particular one, I knew for a fact I wasn't speeding, right? Because there was traffic, right? We were not driving fast. And but the conversation is not even whether or not you are speeding. The conversation goes to whether or not you should pay the bribe. And it's after back and forth about 5 minutes that he realizes he's not going to get a bribe for us. And he says, "Nyinyi endeni, nyinyi kichwa ngumu endeni," right? But it's unfortunate. So I'm pretty certain that a great number of citizens who came on after or before me, right, walitoa hongo, right? They remove something. And when you take that in the aggregate and look at the economic effects of that, in the fact that the person who's supposed to serve and protect is the one that is asking you for a bribe, right? And that's just the police aspect. Try to get any service done, whether at the bank or whatever, or trying to land a contract, right? It's become ingrained in our psyche that you have to
give something.
You have to give something. And it's different if it's I'm at a restaurant and I'm giving a tip, right? This one, I'm giving something to someone whose job it is to provide that service to me, right? They are paid to do this service, but I have to pay them above and beyond. And I think therein lies the problem. So, I think as Kenyans, myself included, I think we complain heavily about the disservice that we face, either whether it's the public sector or even in the private world. And I think for us, what I say is that, look, governments and society and business environments don't just come up out of the blue, right? They are reflections of the society as a whole. So if there is an issue, right, it's us who needs to take a look deeply and saying that, why has this become the norm? And that's where I think now when it comes to public, as we're coming to an election, we're coming to some of this decision-making processes that require civic participation, is where we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we want from our leaders? And I think that's a question that we don't ask ourselves enough. As Patrick Lumumba says, we keep we keep putting people into service places, to, as he says, to guard the chickens, right? And the people we have placed are the ones who are actually, slaughtering them. And then we're surprised. We're surprised, right? We're surprised that it's happened, and we're the ones who
that the butcher man is butchering.
Yeah, we're like, you elected a jackal. What do you think jackals do, right? So you shouldn't be surprised. It would be very different if you're like, you know what? I elected a lamb. I am so surprised that he
But
ate
it's
the
not a
chicken.
hoof for a
Right?
jackal.
That would be a case that we can discuss. Why are the sheep eating the chickens? Right? Everybody should be concerned, right? But the question of like, why are the hyenas eating the chickens? That shouldn't even be a discussion. The question should be, why did we elect hyenas, right? Or why are we having, why do I tolerate a bank manager who is so hawkish, right? And what can we as citizens, as individuals who are getting service from this particular bank or this particular do differently? And I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves a lot.
Okay. All right. So you admit we have corruption, but we're all part of it. It's all big party.
Yeah, it's I remember one of my friends saying, he's from India, and he was saying, look, there's corruption everywhere, and as he goes, at least the positive thing about the Kenyan corruption, it trickles down. I laughed. I said, I don't think we should be looking at trickle down corruption. We do like trickle down economics. I think for me it's like, no, we should not accept it as a way of doing things.
Before you go to that, it's good that the whole thing is coming now about trickle down, and now there's another thing called bottom up these days. But anyway, before you go to the economy models, talking about the police, I don't know, you've traveled. You said you've traveled for 68 countries. You've lived in the US. I don't know, the police in the US, back here in the country, our police hide in the bush so that they can get you on camera when you're overspeeding. I don't know if the same happens in America. It's something mentioned about Zimbabwe, and how they are more concerned about making you adhere to the law, not punishing you for breaking the law. So back here, when you're driving to Naivasha, you never know where the guy is in the bush. He's hiding somewhere. It's either raining on him, or the sun is busy scorching him down. He's in the bush. The only agenda, we must catch them.
Yeah.
There's no initiative of how can we ensure that the citizens are more obedient to the laws, or will know when to overspeed or when not to. Because when you look at the roads, there are not even signage on when you should be doing what kilometers. That Naivasha, they keep arresting people. There's no signage whatsoever. What tells you that you should not go beyond 100 or 50 or whatever it is. When you look at it from a policy perspective, where you've traveled, is the administration more keen on ensuring the citizenry is obedient, or it's more keen on punishing the citizenry?
Yeah. So, my approach to the law is one of, it needs to be a carrot and a stick, right? And the stick needs to be used not as often, right? And the whole idea of the stick is to make it deterrent, right? If we have more law-abiding citizens, at least let's just use the example of the road. If we have more law-abiding citizens when it comes to the road, the very traffic jam that I was complaining about, Gong Road, would not be here, because people would not block intersections. Right? For me, I don't understand why the right has turned red, and there's a line there, and you purposely choose to cross it. You block the intersection. You can't go anywhere, but neither can the guy coming from the T junction, right?
It's on the right side.
Yeah, you cause this log jam, and we're all hooting and complaining. It takes us forever to get anything anywhere. If you have a structure that you have citizens who are more law-abiding, it trickles down to these other avenues, right? We get to places faster, right? Because that people are going to stop at a light, you're going to get your own way. Google even is able to predict the traffic analysis a little bit better. Here, it's very difficult to predict analysis, use predictive analysis for traffic, because Google has no way of knowing when will Gerald block the intersection, right? And, and cause mayhem. But more to your question, I think there should be a mixed approach. One, I think personal opinion is that a lot of these processes should be automated. Yeah, there shouldn't be people hiding in the bush to catch you when you're speeding, right? Because one, it's just ridiculous, right, in this day and age. Two, it's not the most efficient use of public resources, right? We can easily automate the system. And what do I mean by that, right? I've paid my fair share of fines, right? Especially my wife now of 1 year has a heavier foot than I do when it comes to driving, right? I have paid quite a number of tickets. But at least there is no debating whether or not she was speeding. I was like, look, this is your car. This is you who was driving. This is the ticket that we got in the mail. It says we were going 10 over, right? And there's no discussion back and forth. It wasn't you.
They pay you for
you just... You pay the $50, right? And you know, and it serves it, right? And after paying 2 or 3 of them, then you're like, okay, you know what?
I can't continue like this.
And so you use the law as a deterrent mechanism. And you know, for me, that's what I told the officer. Look, I am not saying I wasn't speeding, right? If I was, the argument is not whether or not I was speeding. The argument I was having with him was that I shouldn't be bribing him, that if I have broken the law, he should write me the ticket, right? And I pay where because of the fine, right? He goes, we're not going back and forth here on whether or not I was speeding. I was like, okay, if I was speeding, and the ticket, right? We stop wasting each other's time, right? 1, 2, because once I pay that ticket, right, the fine, then I'm like, you know, right? I mean, that's what the whole idea of a fine, right? It's supposed to.
I'm supposed to give you some feeling of you should do better next time.
And so then I'll be more cognizant, right? Because I mean, if I'm whatever, I don't know what even the fine for is, but if I'm paying 5K, for example, right, that's 5K that could have gone someplace else. And I think one of the ways that we can do, at least in this particular country, is automating that particular process, right? Because we are not able to fix the system immediately, right? Because you can't just call assembly in the morning and tell everyone, okay, be righteous, leo asubuhi hakuna hongo, right?
Stop hiding in bushes.
And since they're not going to do that, right, remove the power from them, right? And let the
give it to systems.
Let the interaction, and they're not expensive, they're much cheaper, also easy to maintain, and there's no discussion between Gerald and I whether or not I was speeding. Gerald, ini gari yako, KC, whatever, yes, right?
Toma kitu.
Right, and you know, because usually when you receive these things in the mail, it shows you your picture, front and back, so you can tell who was driving. If it was your wife, and I'm this was you.
This is you. Unless you can deny. Can deny your forehead.
Right, this is you, right? Everything, down to the block and where it was taken, what the speed limit is, and what you are doing. And if you want to debate it further, they have a link for you to go and see the video, right? If the still pictures are not there, right? You know, we got one. My sister got one. She was driving my car. She ran a red light. I said, Priscilla, you got a ticket for running a red light. No, I stopped. I was like, are you sure? So we just click, you know.
Do you well?
There's no stopping. And there's no denying that. You can't even go to the judge right? Because
the video is right there. The evidence is right there.
Evidence right there. So you just, you know, you.
So we could do better with law. You can use it as a tool to ensure that we are more obedient, not as a punishment tool.
Yes, and I think from the deterrence aspect of the law, right? You know, for me, there are some things that are hardwired in me, not because I got a ticket, but because we are coming to a system where we're all rule abiding. So, for example, seatbelts, stopping at a stop sign, stopping at a red light. You know, a lot of Kenyan drivers who are driving behind me get very mad because when I'm in the lead, because I stop, right? You know, I come to a red light, I'll stop, whether it's the whole 60 seconds, you know, the ones that are counting down, right? That's why the thing was there, right? So you stop, you wait your turn, right? If you want to go ahead, like in mimi niko hapa. And then now the problem is at night, because you can't stop, right? Utapigwa ngeta as you're waiting for the lights to turn red.
Utapigwa ngeta. That is Kenya. And when it's an economy, every economy is the way, you know, it's a whole economy. Even the ngeta guys, they need to sustain the economy. Anyway, so you guys, you keep giving us money. You're giving us money. The other day, we are protesting at IMF over a loan that was being advanced to Kenya. And a few months ago, Parliament as well, National Assembly, raised the debt ceiling in the country. There's been a conversation in the country that our debt is not sustainable. That's at least according to the economy and the kind of beating that we're getting currently. But somehow we still get money. You guys still give us money. You know, you guys, public analysts, you are there. The funds are there. Well, it's business. It's business. The more you give, the better. But the question is, in your own feeling, do you think the Kenyan economy has taken a beating from debt that has taken from loans that it keeps taking?
Yeah. So I think this is a delicate conversation, and it's delicate because it's not. I think what happens when people are protesting debt is that a great number of them are failing to understand the concept of debt, on what it is intended to do, right? So, one, let me just say this: there is no modern country, that is able to fund its infrastructure, its public services without debt, right? Every single one of them, from Japan to the US to all the way down the line, right? Debt is part and parcel of doing business. There's no way around it. And the question we need to be asking ourselves, it's not necessarily whether that debt is sustainable, but how is that debt being utilized, right? And do we have enough in the debt service to actually pay that back? Okay. And the other part is like, did whoever was negotiating this debt, right, get the best option out there? There are multiple places that we can get debt from. I would rather even have that discussion, right, in terms of where we're getting the debt from and should we be getting the debt from them, rather than is the debt sustainable? So in the short run, yes, the debt is sustainable. We're talking about 48% of GDP is what our debt is. What Parliament did is nothing unique in terms of raising the debt ceiling. The U.S. Congress has to do it, 2-3 times a year, right? This is what parliaments do, right? They raise debt ceilings. Otherwise, it will become very difficult to do things, because debt doesn't just service infrastructure and all these other things that we see. There's cash shortfalls that will happen. There's short-term borrowing. There's so many things that is just all being lumped up into debt, right? And we need to unpack it and say, okay, we, for example, should not be doing short-term borrowing to supplement cash shortfalls at such high interest rates or whatever. That would be a good example of a bad debt, right? When the government is not very sure or clear on where the money is coming from. So there could be a question of like, is our financial forecasting off? Is that why we're borrowing, right?
But I'm pretty sure you studied it, because I remember if I'm applying for a loan today, the bank first of all would want to know, where am I going to get the money to pay? Now, we are living in a country where the revenue collecting arm, which is KRA, is falling short of its targets every time. And I could imagine if I'm going to come to get a loan from you as a bank, because I know you run a fintech institution. If I'm coming to get a loan, you want to ask me, give me a statement of maybe 6 or 10 months. What is your source of income? How does your income look like on the monthly and all this? Now, we are in a country where even our debt paying schedules have been pushed higher. Yeah. Remember that time we are short of our timelines. Yeah. But we somehow we still get money.
Yeah, no, I trust me, countries will always.
And you're saying the economy is good.
Countries, even Zimbabwe is able to get money. There will be someone who will give a loan. For me, I think the question is not so much on the debt itself, but the
utilization,
the types of loan, and even that question that you said about the ability to pay. So if and even like the IMF loan, right? It was as personal opinion, it was the wrong loan to protest about. The one that we should be protesting as some of these other ones that we are getting from other countries that I won't name on here.
I'll name them for you. China.
Right? Because one, they're
I hope you're not trying to be politically correct, because you're the one giving us money.
No. Because they are, one, they're not consensual, for one, right? Their debt repayment schedules are just ridiculous. What we have to give in exchange for that particular money is just unprecedented, right? And so the issue I have is with the individual who is negotiating this particular money. It's because it's not free money. There's no free lunch, right? We have to give something back, and the question is, what are we giving back?
Yeah.
So, just for simplicity's sake, you know, you want to finance a road, you know, Naivasha Nakuru Road, and you go to Bank One, and Bank One tells you 10%. Plus, you give me your firstborn son, right? And you employ all my workers. Okay. Bank 2 tells you 5%. You employ your own workers. You do what you want to do with the money, and you repay over 10 years. Right? Go to bank number 3, and they tell you 3% repayment, 20 years, right? But you have to pay us first, right? So you take a look at those 3, and then you'll have someone going to Bank 1 that was 10%, where you have to give your firstborn son and employ the other ones. And you have to ask yourself, why that one when there were other 2 options that were better
to choose from,
right? So that is something that also has to be taken into consideration. It's not just the debt itself, but what are the terms? What are the interest payments? Are they consensual? Are they not? What are we being asked to give, right? Do we have the potential of losing our port if we don't pay back, right? All these things, right? Then when you now lump them together, we can have a better understanding of whether that debt was necessary too. The other part is, are we doing feasibility studies, right? On it. So we're having all these roads built, and a great number of them are good. You know, has NEMA or anyone else asked done the economic analysis on the value of returns, right? And whether that's a good investment or not. So these are definitely questions that we should and should be having increasingly. But to the citizens, I tell them, there are public comment periods and all this stuff. Why do you comment after it's been done? Why don't you comment before it's been passed? I mean, why aren't we having these discussions? Why are we having the discussions after, right? If we really feel as a country that, you know, this is something that we should change, right? At least with the new constitution, right? Public budgeting and citizen engagement is a part and process. This stuff has to be read. You know, how many of us have gone to the reading, right, and raised their hands up and ikona swali, right? You know, it doesn't. Once the law has been passed, there's little we can do once it's been signed.
These guys hardly consult us. Anyway, that day we were just idling around. Then we saw there's an expressway. We never told about it. It just appeared. But anyway, I don't know if you've taken your time as well as a policy expert to analyze our public debt policy. You know, the policy that guides how we manage our finances, how much we can borrow, how much we can come in within. When you compare, you would say we are better now, but I think we are worse. When you compare with Kibaki administration, with the administration that we have today, the money that was in the country was for the citizens. Banks were pitching tents, asking business people, SMEs, to come and take loans. Today is a different story. Even going to the banks yourself, following the money and going to ask for it, you'll not find the money, the loans there. The government has swept the money within the local markets. It has swept the money in the international market. It keeps sweeping and borrowing. I don't know if you've taken time to analyze or to try and really study our public debt policy within the country. Do you think it's healthy enough? What scale would you give it?
Oh my gosh! So I mean, I'm not going to try to be politically correct on this one, but let me say this: when it comes to borrowing, I think there's a misconception as to the government or any institution, and this, whether it's Kenya or Ethiopia or wherever, is swooping up the money that would otherwise be going to the private sector, right? For the large aspect, that's not the case, right? Because the places where the private sector borrows or where individuals borrow is not where governments borrow, right? They borrow from two different markets, right? Why? Because governments have the full faith and credit of themselves that they can coerce their citizens to pay taxes. And so when you ask
they have security, they have organic security.
There's a different aspect of security. You have to show all these statements, like Kitu, all this other stuff, right?
For them, they just say we have 50 million citizens.
Yes,
that's enough.
And governments can do something that corporations and individuals can't do. They can deficit borrow, right? When you're in the negative, right, you're actually earning negative income, right? You're not going to go to a bank and ask it for a loan. The bank is going to say, let me see your ability to pay. And you're like, oh, actually, I'm losing money, right? No bank will give it to you, right? But governments are able to do that. Why? Because, right, there's an issue of the ability of citizens to pay. Two, right, they can borrow on your kids and my kids' ability to pay, which is something that you and I cannot do. So the government can say, you know what, in 2050, waigua mdogo watalipa, right?
We'll have 10 million more children.
Right? And the reason why is that governments, whether it's the Kibaki regime or the Moi regime or whatever, the point is that governments will be there. There's no way that the country itself will not be able. There'll be an administration there, right? And the administration, whichever one it is, right, will have to uphold, right, the previous administration's borrowing. It's not like, now we're coming to an election next year, right, and whoever is going to come in says, everything from the Kenyatta regime, you are tutadipa, right? You're going to lose international borrowing rating and stuff. But I'm going back to the notion of once the government borrows. Let's take a look at the big highway that's being built, right? The government is borrowing and the government is facilitating the building of it. The government itself doesn't build, right? It doesn't have construction trucks. It doesn't have cement. It doesn't have sand. It doesn't have a public works to do it. And even if it did, right, those people are not robots, right? They're employed. So there's this aspect of like when a government finances a project and it's done quite astronomically, the whole general idea is to stimulate the economy, right? Particularly on infrastructure projects, right? That's why governments, when economies are down, go on a ridiculous spending spree. They deficit spend. That's in 2020, 2021, right? Kenya, the US, none of these countries are unique. If you look at every single one of them, they have all deficit spend, they've all borrowed a lot, and the whole idea is to stimulate the economy. So when there's this whole aspect of crowding out, right, is slightly misplaced, right? Because there is no essentially crowding out being done, right? Is that it's not like y'all are drawing pictures of water from the same aspect and uyu akichukua yako imeisha. That's not what's happening, right? One, you're borrowing from two different places. Two, when the government borrows, unlike the individual, right, it goes to society in general. So if you look at the freeway, all those trucks, even if we say that some of them are foreign owned, right, the sand is not being pitched in, it's being bought from Mombasa Cement or whatever. There is an aspect of that is going to the individual, and so that's that's an interesting conversation that also should be had. Very little of government's borrowing, discounting for what goes into corruption, right, actually doesn't go to funding the economy. Now, I'm not saying that all the infrastructure projects are well thought out and placed, right? That's going back to the conversation that we were having. We should say, okay, yes, I know we're building a road, right? And we're going to be able to fund it. The question is, right, is that road the best use of public resources? Or should we have been building a school? Or should we have been building an airport? That conversation we're not having very well, and we should have.
Okay. So I think the conversation now should change. What do you have? Now, billions of money pumped into the economy. We've not, I don't know, as a citizen, I've not. You've seen the ripple effect of investment. Maybe the money goes elsewhere because we are not feeling the impact, the stimulation in the economy. If you look at Kenya, for instance, that's been on a spending spree. Launching projects, sometimes we find it a bit astronomical. But we're not feeling it at that level of mwananchi. Anyway, moving on quickly, the institutions that give money to countries, you mentioned rightfully about countries which are losing ports. There's been a discussion around even Kenya losing Mombasa port, by the way. I don't know if you've heard about it because of that. And in other conversations, loaning institutions and funds have been seen as an evil in Africa, as a control tool in Africa in terms of controlling the economy, controlling the way politics is done, controlling the leadership structure. Because if I'm feeding you, then man, you gotta listen to me. They say whoever pays the piper calls for the music. In between I can say, oh, weka reggae. And then because I'm the one paying the tune, you have to put it. Now, African countries clearly are getting deeper and deeper into debt and control and kind of financial manipulation. The other day, we had the IMF giving us instructions on how we should run our institutions. They're even telling us that you need to streamline universities, close some parastatals. this is not Kenyan government. It's an institution that's giving us money, but they're not telling us, since we are giving you money, you guys need to do this and the rest. So do you agree with the conversation that the people who keep lending money to African countries, especially our economies as ours, because we're feeling it, are they an evil in the whole system?
No, I don't think.
What is the agenda behind funding?
I don't think there's an evil, but you're right. Whoever pays the piper calls the tune, right? And I think there has to be an understanding as to why would I don't work for the fund, but there has to be an understanding of why the fund would ask for close of parastatals. And as a Kenyan citizen, the knee-jerk reaction is like, why the heck is a foreign institution telling me what I should do with my parastatals? What I didn't do as a Kenyan was look at those parastatals and see, are they actually burning cash? Are they effectively spending money? I would encourage all Kenyans to take a look at the parastatals that we have and how many of them are actually providing the services that they were meant to be, or how many of them are actually bleeding us dry. It's an aspect of what they were doing in Greece in terms of austerity measures, right? You're trying to increase this particular line of spending because we're in a development-led growth type of economy, right? And that development requires a lot of cash to either build roads, build schools, build all this other stuff. But then use the example of building schools. You're like, okay, we want to build 10 schools, all good and well. And then you have an existing school that is spending 90% of the budget, but producing lackluster output or students. Of course, there should be a mandate to take a deeper look at that school and figure out whether it needs to be closed down. Remember, at least on the fund, this types of the loans, a good number of the loans that the fund does are for budget stability, right? So if fund is giving country X a loan for budget stability, right, it means that the budget was askew, right? Otherwise, why would you be needing stability support? So as an institution, they come in and say, this is where we think there are inefficiencies, right? And in order for us to give you this loan that you want for stability, right, here are some of the things that you have to solve. It's the same aspect. If you're going to a commercial loan, getting one, and for a business loan, and the government, the bank sets up some of the parameters for you qualifying for that loan, right? So here's your repayment schedule. Here's what you can do with this money, right? So if I'm getting a mortgage, for example, if I'm going to a bank and getting a mortgage, once I get that money, I can't now turn around and buy a car, right? The bank has not only the capacity, but the right to tell me you're applying for a mortgage loan, you can only use it to buy a house, right? You can't be like buying 10 cars and doing all this other stuff, right?
You can buy a matatu.
Yeah, you can buy a matatu, right? So, for me, I would encourage the citizens to read those fiscal sustainability analysis that the fund produces. You don't even have to read past the executive summary. It's quite telling what's there, right? And I think if our citizens, a good number of them, not saying all of them, a good number of them were well informed in terms of the debt aspect, they could ask the government better questions. I'm not saying that the questions, citizens should not be asking questions and they should just take this sitting down. I think what I'm saying is we should be asking better questions. The question should be not why are they telling us to close the parastatals, but why did the fund find those parastatals to be inefficient? Right? I need to take a look at that, right? Postal Union, right? When was the last time they delivered you a letter? Right?
These days we don't write letters.
Precisely, but so then why are they in the budget, right? Why?
These days it's a bank.
It's a bank,
called
right?
Post
Right?
Bank
It's called Post Bank. Right? It's great, and then the question becomes how efficient is it relative to, right?
So maybe they should tell us to re-engineer, not to close them.
Yeah, re-engineer, but of course some of them have stayed past their welcome.
It's like now the bank saying because you bought your house, now they come and say, now close that window. Close that one. Seal that door. Now you should be using this window instead of the door. You should be using this door to get out. They need the money. You're going to pay the money. Anyway.
So So for sure, the bank should not be doing that. But what the bank should be doing to secure its asset, it's coming in and telling you like your foundation is being eaten by termites. Fix it. Right, because if you don't fix it, I'm going to lose my investor.
Your investor. All right. Now, I would wonder how much these funds have helped countries achieve. But before you go there, I want to read a comment here from Rosemary Kabugi. Says, "Good morning. World Bank gave money for judiciary reforms, especially digitization, but clearly nothing was done. What happened? Rwanda has a fully digitized judiciary, while we are analog to the core."
So I actually do not know, but I do know where we can actually get an answer for that, and I can provide those particular details to actually get the specific answer for that one with our communications officer based in Nairobi. But it is true this aspect of talking about digitization. There's digitization can bring a lot of reform and efficiencies. I've seen it done in Armenia and in Azerbaijan. Where digitization of judiciary was very effective, particularly in Armenia.
Okay. Daktari Ekurokot here. I don't know if you know Daktari Ekurokot. You've heard about him?
No.
Ekurokot, that's for Tadwe. So presidential candidate Tadwe Alliance.
Okay.
He's saying greetings. Did you hear about Punguza Mzigo?
Punguza Mzigo?
Yeah.
No, I did not.
Did you hear about Punguza Mzigo? Looks like you've not been coming around enough times. So you should be staying around much more.
The thing is, maybe I'm not on KOT as much.
Yeah, so greetings to all TACLA. Salimio Wachira na mpe pongezi zangu. Asante sana Daktari Ekurokot. Lucy Kia Wachira says, how does World Bank do follow-up ya hizi pesa zao? E.g. in June gave $130 million for vaccines. Yet all I'm seeing is Kenya government just giving us vaccines that have been donated.
The question was where the funds come from?
Let me read it again. How does World Bank do a follow-up ya hizi pesa zao? E.g. in June, they gave $130 million for vaccines. Yet all I am seeing is Kenya government just giving us vaccines that have been donated.
So, no, I mean, the follow-up, at least for these multilateral institutions, are done quite efficiently. And there's... there this either reports or follow-ups that are done from the fiduciary and procurement aspect to make sure that that the funds are being used effectively. I can say as I said again, this is not my area of expertise, at least when it comes to Kenya, because it's not where I'm covering. But I would be hard pressed to believe that.
I think you need to link me up with your communication guy in Nairobi, because there are a lot of questions Kenyans want to ask.
Yeah, I know you can definitely ask. You can definitely ask them, and they would be well placed to answer them because that's their background.
Okay, all right. Okay, Bernard Gigan says, ask our guest, what is the way forward for mega projects done by Chinese, funded by Chinese, and all resources supplied by Chinese? They then take all the money to China. We have to pay for the loan as it is. All right. I think you might not want to talk about the Chinese themselves, but let's talk about money that is given to an economy. People bring in money into an economy. They spend money within their projects, and they take back money back to the economy.
Yeah. And this is the illusion that I had said earlier, that there needs to be a concrete conversation as to how that debt or those loans or those projects are being articulated right, before they're being decided. Because, it's in the public domain. We've seen what some of these projects are happening, the ports that are being taken over in Sri Lanka. The question becomes how do we in good faith get into such negotiations to where that's the outcome that we're receiving? Two, why should we be so consensual when it comes to these loans, to where someone not only will give us the funds, but then they tell us who we can employ and where they can stay and what they can do, right? I think those are the discussions that we need to have, and have a clear conversation on them and how that can be avoided, right? Because at the very least, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take money from the East. If it's the cheapest avenue, yes, let's by all means go ahead and do so. But the consequences of that needs to be
reanalyzed.
To be realized. Okay, what is it that we are gaining? Right? Is it to our benefit? And this is where the feasibility studies come in. Right? This is where essentially, it's knowing what you're paying for. Right?
But down here, what really matters is the 30%. Have you heard about the 30%? That percent that they give these guys to munch first. Pangoza jasho. Then to approve the loans, they don't care what happens after that. It's not really to their interest. And I think then it's a all failed system. It's not even about the parastatals that you're talking about. It's not about the institution that needs to be streamlined and closed. Then the whole system is just rigged, from the people who approve these loans, people who seek these loans, and for what reasons, for what benefits. Because I think in Kenya, the really important vision in any initiative is the money that someone is going to gain from it. Not that we are not what we're going to get in the good of the economy.
On that, I should say that I think the question should not be so much focused on the loans, because loans are part and parcel of the entire budget as it is, right? Yeah, we can lament debt, we can lament loans, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a very small percentage of the entire the new budget that was read, right? It may be, it's not like it's just the money from the debt that is being misused, right?
So even the money collected from us.
Yeah, maybe, right? If there was a little bit better utility of the whole entire pot, we would need less in terms of loans, right?
Okay. Man Nathan says, Daktari, is there hope for the Kenyan economy to bounce back after the rampant corruption, political instability, COVID pandemic, and now we are gazing towards 2022 general elections? Our borrowing is one thing, where we are doing capital borrowing and more so infrastructure. What genuine advice can you give to the big boys and the leadership? And I think I'd want to twist this as an economic question. What's going on in the country today is everybody is telling us how the economy should be run. Interestingly, everybody. But all these guys, somehow they've been in government. They've been in leadership, but now they somehow know where the economy should run.
As an election.
Some are telling us about the trickle down, like you're saying, the trickle down corruption, and then about trickle down economy. They're telling us about bottom up. Someone is telling us about middle out. Some other person is telling us about uchumi bora kwa wote. We're having all these conversations. I don't know if you've taken time to really study the way where our economy is. These are comments from the citizens who are feeling the pinch and are questioning the way the country is being run. And they probably feel, from what you're reading in the mood, they feel the economy is not in the right direction. And I can see both on YouTube and Facebook, the question is, how do we get back our economy from where it was? How do you think, where do you think, as an expert, where is the turnaround? Forget about all this, the economic model is being floated by politicians. From a policy perspective, from an expert perspective, how do you think we're going to turn around this economy?
Yeah. First, I told you I'm an optimist, right? So I look at glass half full as opposed to half empty perspective. But I think if I was the one with the reins for a day, or I actually need a little bit more than a day, is to figure out, what is it that we have internally. And it goes back to this aspect of that I had mentioned in terms, what is it that we do competitively and comparatively well, right? And we have to focus on those before we start, getting into things that we know that we are not doing very well, right? And I think if we can focus to the basics, for me, is looking at the economy and dissecting it. And asking ourselves, what's the biggest portion? And I can answer that for you. The biggest portion is in agriculture, almost 60%, right? What are we doing to incentivize, agricultural-led production? People just think of agriculture in terms of picking up a djembe and going to the garden and everybody's sweating at the brow.
And showing up with Sukuma Wiki.
Yeah. It's $1 billion industry, like literally, right? And one that is essential, right? And not going away, right? People, we can say, let's bring production plants and get these phones, made in here. But this is sometimes an impulsive buy. Most of the time, if I have to pick between this and chakula, the phone will not be something that...
You'll eat fast.
Yeah. But food is always something that people need, right? And we are so agriculturally blessed, right? Focusing on the basics means There's such a level of good things that we can do, at least for the agriculture sector, that can trickle down to other sectors from manufacturing. So the question I have is how much of the value addition is being done here? And not so much, right? Why do we have to take our Kericho gold and have it packaged in Dubai and then sold back to us, right? We can't put the box in Mombasa. We can't do the value additions there. There's so much economic output that is lost on some of these things simply because we're not doing the stuff that we do well, right? We're all so focused on other things. The whole phrase of the grass is always green on the other side, right? We're so busy looking at that, and then we forget the things that we do very well, and we're being replaced by the Malawians and the Sri Lankans, right? To where the tea industry, as big as it was in Kenya, and as big and renowned it is, right, is being caught up by other countries, and so we lose that particular sector, and then we do, right? It's very difficult to gain it back. So for me, from an economic standpoint, I would start off with that. What is it that we do very well, and barrel down on those things, right? Get those things to a high efficiency and effectiveness aspect before I move on to the other things, because you can squeeze. I'd use an analogy of juice, right? We're taking an orange and we're only squeezing like 40 or 50% of the available capacity of the juice that's in it, and then disregarding it and then complaining that we don't have enough juice. Right.
Okay. Abbas, you're going to say is if you critically look at potential of our country, which you've actually almost admitted that our country is good compared to other countries. If you critically look at the potential of our country as we do not deserve to be given loans or even aid. Some countries do not even have a quarter of the wealth Kenya has. Surprisingly, they are the ones helping us today. This earth is hard. Okay. Abbas, you're going to say is, okay, I think that was on Judiciary. James Moda says, punguza mzigo, pungua kijanjui. Mbugua Kinyai says, my greetings to Dr. Wachira. Good job, Jera Bitok. He's a guy in diaspora as well. Mbugua Kinyanjui, good to see you. Jen Mumbi says, Dr. Wachira, how can the young people in Mashinani establish themselves without waiting for the government to side here?
It's a very good question, and actually one that I would really love. This is a big passion of mine. I think it starts off from the notion of we are always looking for help. One of the biggest problems that I have with the organizations that I work with is when I go to a particular endeavor and ask how many need help, everybody raises their hand, including those who have the means, right? So we run a scholarship program, for example, and you say, okay, who needs help with school fees? Kill them to even those who can actually pay for their own school fees by sweat of their brow will raise their hand. So it becomes very difficult to sift through this to figure it out. For youth aspect, I think there's a lot that people can do as individuals, and I admire the youth who are actually doing it. One, it's through organization, pulling together. We have sometimes a very individualistic approach when it comes to business and doing things. And I tell youth there are a lot of resources, but we just tend to look at the financial side of things. There's social capital. There are multiple other types of capital that are non-financial. And we can tap into those without having to wait for the government or having to wait for an NGO. Organization becoming one, right? Putting ourselves together. And then, that formalization aspect of it allows us to grow a little bit to the point where now we can go and seek assistance. For youth, I'll tell them, just the conversation that I was having. I mean, I went to Nairobi University last week, the Lower Kabete campus. And looking at some of the agricultural reforms that they're running, and there is so much potential, for youth. I visited a rose farm in Nakuru and asked the owner, "What's your biggest pitfall? What's your biggest problem?" And he looked at an old man and he said, that guy, and I didn't understand. And I said, "What a neighbor? What's wrong?" He goes, "No, it's like he's on." Out in terms of retiring, he has been working for me for the last 30 years, right? The amount of knowledge that he will take with him, right, is completely lost, and I have no one to replace him. Yet, this gentleman is running a just one farm, multi-million-dollar business on a month, right? Not in a year, right? On a month, right? when we went back to the 1 out of every 3 flowers in Europe come from Kenya.
Wow.
This is the capacity that I'm talking about. Whereas us as the youth, when we think about agriculture and agribusiness, we're thinking about just picking up the djembe. And what I tell you is like there is so much, right, that you're a digital native, right? Take technology and solve this particular problem for us. And there's a lot of untapped potential. So last week we ran on the Kenya Youth Summit, and there was a panel that we titled Youth in Underrepresented Sectors. And one of them was in agriculture and in other STEM industries, right? Whereas most of us, we're thinking of just banking jobs and, white collar jobs, right? Whereas literally there's a huge gap in agriculture and in the service sector and in other industries within Kenya that the youth are not filling in, and they're going abroad, right? Because if a job can't be filled here, right, it's gonna go elsewhere.
It's going to end up somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the day. All right. Well, I think I've seen some guy from the UK, Vision Total, Kenya. It says the main problem of Kenya is not just debt, it's also productivity. The economy is too small for 50 million people. Kenya is a net importer, not manufacturing, and is not an asset investor. Well, that's an interesting comment from the UK. Now, another thing, you mentioned about things leaving the country and going out. You also talk about the brain drain. Look at people like you. Great people. You could make a great finance minister, for instance, but not in the way system is. It's too rotten. You'll also be screaming around after 2 years, telling us about other crazy things about government and throwing in insults. But yes, we have great minds that are out there making strides in the industry, in other countries and all that. We've experienced a lot of people these days would want to be out there more than to be within. And it has a lot to, I don't know if it has a lot to do with the system the way it is. People feel it's not a favorable place to operate in. But if, for instance, you're given an opportunity to come back, and you're told, now, where they arrested the other guy, Rotich, and they took him to a dungeon somewhere, you replace him as a CS, finance minister. How would your feeling be like? Would you be willing to come in and do that? And what is the explanation behind the brain drain that we're experiencing as a country?
Yeah. It's interesting because I was looking at this just 2 days ago in terms of the brain drain. There were a few arguments about it. One guy said it's just ridiculous. Other people were saying that it's a big issue and they had the countries ranked. So I actually do have some data, coincidentally, not because I was practicing for this, but because I was looking at this. I'm speaking at the KESA, the Kenya Association for Academics in the US. And part of their mandate is actually using scholarly research to incentivize development on the country. So let's tackle the brain drain first. One, I think it's misplaced, right? Because it's not the fact that it's just the cream of the crop that goes. And collectively, we're talking about 2 to 3% of the population, about 3.8 million Kenyans who are abroad, give or take. The assumption that those 3.8 million are the brightest of us, and everyone who is left in the country is just dumb. I think it's just I personally don't like that vision, right? I think it can be a cop out to not finding solutions here, but. Be that as it may, my challenge to those of us, now speaking to those of us abroad, my father said this to me: if you think that the opportunities you are given are just for you so you can have a job with you and your wife at University of Ohio and you and your 4 kids or your family of 4 and then you're okay, then you've missed the whole purpose of life. The whole idea of why you were given these opportunities so that you can give back to society. And that's what I strive to do. So to your second question, would I come back? Yeah, in a heartbeat. In fact, that's why I'm sitting here. I come back often. Most, if not all my investments are here, not only in terms of resources, but properties and things like that. I was speaking for myself, not the other diasporans. I invest here. 2, the whole idea that diasporas are just aloof is ridiculous. There was a reason why last month, in June, Patrick Njoroge, CBK governor, came to speak to Kenyans in diaspora, right, in the US. Why? Because the amount of money that is being sent back by Kenyans who are working abroad has become the single largest foreign direct investment in this country, right? So why are the Kenyans sending money if they're not interested in their own country? I mean, and if Kwani, are they sending $4 billion for Mazishi? This whole time. I mean, it's just it's some of these things are just ridiculous. If you take a look at the data, it's like the biggest source of foreign direct investment comes from Kenyans living abroad, right? We went for opportunities and we're looking to give back. How many of them have come back? A great number of them. I know a great number of my friends. One of them who went to NYU, lived with us. And she's here. She's got a job at Microsoft Nairobi. She's been here for the past, 3-4 years. And to the youth, I tell them not to look at the West or outside the country as this panacea to all their problems. You'll be very surprised. Utakula shida bure, right? You'll go. It's very difficult for you to starve in your home country. I'm not saying that there are not people who are starving. I'm just saying it's you at home, because I can go now as a combo beside easy. It is very easy to starve in a foreign country because there's no place to go ask for help, right? And a lot of people do. They eat a lot of heartache. So, and also purely from a financial perspective, right? I tell the youth, yes, do you want to go abroad and study? If you do get an opportunity, go. But only take that opportunity if they're fully funding you. 2, there's no reason why the vast majority of us should be going to study for our bachelor's degree abroad. Why? Because even if I take, a top performing school that's expensive, like Strathmore, you can do an MBA there for what? Maybe 1.5 million Kenyan shillings, which is, yes, I agree, a lot of money, but it pales in comparison to what you will pay for that same degree abroad, not counting the living expenses, right? In the United States, even in the public schools, University of Maryland, where I am, you're still paying an upward of $9,000 per semester, right? In-state tuition. Out-of-state tuition, we're talking about $15,000 per semester, right? Per semester, right? And you're going to go through a whole 4-year program paying, and 8 semesters, paying $1.5 million, right? By the time you're done, right, you could have had 10 degrees for you and your family for that price on the continent. So what I tell people, do you want to go abroad? Yes. But go abroad for the things that you cannot get here, right? The ones that you can get here, get them because you'll get them much cheaper. They're no different from everything else, right? Now, if you want to do nuclear engineering, if you want to do some advanced technical degree that the universities here do not provide, go for that.
And I think the thing that we cannot get here is something called money.
And then once you go...
that's what you can't get here. It's something called money.
And once you go and get it, right, then come back.
They can come back.
And then make it easier for the next person who's going to study that particular degree. They don't have to go abroad because you've created the...
So now tell us about what you're doing. I've understood you have several. You've been involved in the youth as well, even within World Bank, and you also have your own initiatives that you're running around young people, around empowering them. You also said you have a business that you run here. You have an organization that you run here. Maybe you can just take us through what you do and what opportunities are available there.
Yeah. So I guess one way for it to look about my particular path is to look at the purpose of what it is that I want to do. And the purpose is to give back, whether it's in the business aspect or whether it's in the NGO aspect. All the organizations that I have started or that I work with have a common utility goal, which is provision, particularly for youth and particularly for SMEs, starting your businesses and so forth, and school as well. And the reason why I do that is, in this particular country, nearly 60 to 70% of the population is under the age of 25. So we have a huge youth population that is largely unemployed. Wouldn't be able to give a job to everyone or give a scholarship to everyone. But what we can do is have a candid discussion and conversation is that how can we create and provide better jobs within this particular country, because not everyone is going to get the opportunity to go abroad, and actually you shouldn't, right? We can do a lot of the things here. That's if we are all trying to go abroad, that's that's what we will strike to this brain-driven
Maybe you should also try and
conversation
get me a studio there. Okay.
so so the things that we do is that one, I guess one of the oldest organizations that I work with is called Inspire Spaces, founded by my good friend Davi. And this one we give scholarships. So far we have 207 students in high school and in university on scholarship. We started that in 2013. We only had 10. It was us giving back, 600 here, 800 here, and eventually we paid for 10 students in fees, and it's growing. There's the Youth Engagement Society, which my sister and I started in 2017, and then that one is really focused on engaging and inspiring and empowering youth to live what we call a life of fulfilled aspirations. And what we say here is that, we tell people to dream, but the capacity of that dream is constrained by their reality. So it's very difficult to imagine something that you have not interacted with in one way or another. So what do you mean by that, Dr. WACHIRA? It means that you as Gerald cannot think of being an astronaut or cannot think of being a virologist if you have never heard of something as a virologist, right? You can't enter your psyche. So we create those encounters with youth. We're like, this is a virologist.
Do you still want to be here?
This is what they do.
After looking at them, do you still want to be
Yeah. This is an economist. This is what they want to do, right? Because you have people who are like, I want to become a doctor, but I'm squeamish around blood, right? You're like, either you don't know what a doctor is, or you need to figure these things out. Or I want to become a doctor, but I got a C- in anatomy. I was like, okay. That is probably not your skill set, right? Unless you were sick that day but if you look at whole papers, doctor is CCC, then you're like, chances are you're not going to become a good doctor, right? A medical doctor, right? So, but you're making A's in this other ones. Maybe this is where we should look. So we give funding and resources, and then with the organization that I started, it's fintech, and also started on a problem that I was having, which was this foreign direct investment, sending money back home. It became a very difficult aspect, and so I didn't set out to create a solution. I set out to investigate whether there's a better way, and then I realized, at least from my takes, there's no better way, and so we came together with a few friends, and we started this, and the whole general idea behind this, at least our vision and our goal, is to create a fund that helps and facilitates SMEs, particularly those youth-led SMEs, with training, access to finance. The very question that we're talking about, lack of banks and access to financial inclusion, is a problem that we want to solve. Right, and we want to solve from an avenue of actually giving back, right? Because if we can unlock, and this is where going back to the debt, right? It's very difficult to grow a business without debt. Right? If you're only relying on savings, right? Because what happens is that you're not able to scale, right? But it's very difficult for you to go into a bank as a young person and get a loan. And why is that? Largely because the system is not set up to facilitate that transaction. We want to change that, aggressively change that, turn it on its head, and actually become the avenue for financial inclusion and access to finance for youth and SMEs.
All right. Okay. So do we have any opportunities that we have now currently that you would want to float the young people watching this morning?
Yeah. There are several. I would definitely ask, follow us at Youth Engagement Society, or our website is engagementsociety.org. We place a lot of information there, whether it's access to resources for people who want to go study abroad, for example, for people who are interested in getting jobs abroad as well. Right, we have a lot of avenues and that we facilitate those transactions, local solutions as well. So we are always partnering with organizations and putting that information out there. So follow me, David WACHIRA, either on Facebook or YouTube or wherever, and we share this information quite often. So anytime we get something, either we're doing it internally or we're partnering with another organization, we do. So for example, next month, IBM and I are going to be running a whole month-long training on digital literacy that is free, right, to anyone who wants to participate. So if you've ever wanted to do enterprise design thinking, coding, you name it. And I'm not a tech expert, but we will be providing those solutions in partnership with IBM for free to the society.
That is online? Oh.
Yeah, it will be online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it will be online. Yes. Yeah.
All right. So if you want any information on that, you can look for David WACHIRA on YouTube, Facebook, you're on Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, I try to stay away from the KOT, but I'm on Twitter.
So you can get out there so you can see if there's any information that you can get regarding anything that you would want to participate in, that you are giving on a range of opportunities that are floating. And I hope we'll have one or two people benefiting from today's discussion, and how best we can be able to move forward together. Is say that he's so passionate about building the young people, also building back his country. It's been a pleasure having you, sir. If I let you go, maybe if you have any one last, we call it here the tackle of the day. So I don't know if you have any punch for the day.
Punch of the day. Push, yeah. I'll go back to the conversation that we had on stereotypes. The notion that we should be better at how we view others. Because this whole notion of putting people in boxes by their appearance or what they do, what they sound like, is part and parcel of the problem that we are experiencing as a country, particularly as we go to the election phase. So I would tell young people, look, you control 70% of the country, right? Last election, 10 million people voted. That's a small number compared to the number of youth who have the capacity to vote. Yeah. So go vote. Go make your decision hard. You have the right and the privilege to do so. So I would encourage young people as we approach this election cycle, to turn out in droves and go vote. And don't listen to the sounds of the wind, because sometimes, at least politically, they will lead you wrong.
Sounds of the wind. Okay, maybe you could be more specific. Who is the wind? Who is the wind? Who is the wind?
DM me and I'll tell you. DM me and I'll tell you.
All right, dear WACHIRA, I'll tell you who is the wind. Let's stop listening to the sounds of the wind. It's been a pleasure having you. This has been another Tuesday. A great conversation with Dr. David WACHIRA, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Asante sana. Aya, unajua nasemanga, there's nothing, I don't know if you've ever, okay, you are abroad of course, but down here, there's nothing as sweet as a wave message. You see it, wave. David WACHIRA sent this morning to you. Okay. So we appreciate you guys in diaspora. So keep doing it. Keep sending me those. Keep sending us those.
That's true.
Keep waving to us.
Yes.
All right. So we appreciate you. You've been a part of a great discussion, and I think we'd want to be a part of this conversation. On Thursdays, we usually have something we call Diaspora Edition. Okay. So we have a conversation here around the Kenyans in diaspora, how they can participate in governance, and how they would want to see things happening differently. So we would wish to have this conversation the more. Maybe even come there and see what you guys are doing.
Certainly, and I have a lot of people who you can speak to who are really passionate about contributing back and plan on giving back. So, I can link you to those, and you can put them on the hot seat like you did me.
And I think you're very slippery. I did not sit you properly. Rather, I will next time. All right, it's been a pleasure having you, sir, and wish you the very best on what you're doing. And we notice that you think we see it. Maybe you might not feel it, but we see, and we appreciate. And I say, if we all pull in a small way, we could make a better country.
Precisely.
I put where I am, you pull where you are. We will make a bigger country. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure having you, the guys on YouTube and also the guys on Facebook. Thank you for participating. The audiences in the UK, it's been always a pleasure having you. In Australia, US as well. All the guys in diaspora, it's been great having you as well. And also local. Asante sana watu wangu wa nyumbani hapa. Thanks for always supporting up and propping us up. Without you, I always tell you, without you, the tackle could never be. And we're still celebrating our birthday. Kama unataka kutufanyia birthday, ni sawa. Tunakula birthday pole pole. The tackle is turning one. We've been turning one. So, and we'll keep turning one until we say things happening. So it's been a pleasure having you. And let's hope we're going to continue growing this platform together and growing the conversation. And we keep winning together and we get to build a better country. Until tomorrow, see you guys on Wednesday. Nasa kesho tuko kinaitwa Siasa Wednesday. Siasa Wednesday resumes tomorrow. Get to tackle the issues of the week that has been. A lot is happening. Yesterday, the president said, if you are tired in this house, you are free to divorce yourself. This is deputy. Until then, see you. Enjoy your day. This is a tackle and it ends now. Bye-bye and we love you.